All right, so today we're going to talk about if dumpers move on faster. And this is a difficult question to answer because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that we really have to dive into attachment styles to answer it. But first things first, if you're new to this program or you're new to the YouTube channel or the website, probably the first thing that you should do if you're going through a breakup is take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz. It's a simple, free, 2-minute quiz that's basically designed to tell you what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back so you know whether or not you're gonna be wasting your time. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, the fastest way to find out how to take this quiz is simply look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on it. There's a link there, just click on it, it'll take you directly to the quiz. It's free, it'll take you no more than 2 minutes to complete and you'll get kind of a direction that you should be going. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's actually talk about if dumpers move on quickly after a breakup. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting, nuanced question. The general consensus among everyone seems to be that dumpers, meaning someone who has dumped you or broken up with you, tend to move on more quickly after a breakup. And when I first started ex-boyfriend recovery and even ex-girlfriend recovery, I would write articles, film videos, record podcast episodes, and I do it kind of just based on how I felt the situation worked from my perspective and through my gut. But what I quickly learned was that that's not always the best way to approach it. Sometimes the best way to approach it is to do empirical studies to understand what's actually working or what actually the truth is. And that age-old thought that dumpers tend to move on more quickly after a breakup might not actually be true. The more I learned, the more I realized in order to maybe answer this question, we first need to understand attachment styles. What are the 4 main attachment styles? Well, we have secure attachments, anxious attachments, avoidant attachments, and fearful attachments. In other words, attachment styles tend to be the best way to determine how someone will move on after a breakup, whether it will be quick or not so quick. So here's what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna briefly define what the 4 attachment styles are, or the 4 main ones, and then I'm going to take a look at how each one of them tends to handle a breakup. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that your ex will react this way. This is just meant to be a generalization of how this works. But what it will do is give you some insight into someone's brain when they go through a breakup. Because the number one mistake that I used to make was assuming that because someone breaks up with you, they don't also feel the heartbreak and pain of going through a breakup. That's false. Generally speaking, it's pretty equal. Both parties tend to be very upset. So let's deal with the 4 main attachment styles. So what you're gonna kind of find as we look at each one of these attachment styles is that each one of them is going to handle a breakup very differently. And counterintuitive to how you might expect, the ones that tend to get over breakups the fastest tend to be the most healthy. So with that out of the way, or with that explained, let's talk about how secure attachment style dumpers tend to handle breakups. If the dumper is a secure attachment style, someone like this is gonna tend to cope with a breakup in a healthy way. They'll look at the breakup and take stock of what they'll ultimately need to be happy, and sometimes if the breakup was amicable, you'll find that they'll even try to be friends afterwards. Now, pretty much everyone knows who is familiar with attachment styles or attachment theory that the secure attachment is pretty much the holy grail of attachment styles. It's always what you want to be or become if you're not a secure attachment. Now, here's the interesting thing. Let's say a secure attachment ex broke up with you. They are actually more likely to move on from the breakup more quickly than the other attachment styles, which is a little counterintuitive. But because they have so much fortitude, because they have so much sense of self and they understand that they can actually move past a breakup without it breaking them down, and they have more of an identity than the actual relationship itself, they tend to move on a little bit more quickly. But that doesn't mean that they don't feel pain. That doesn't mean that they're not depressed. That doesn't mean that they don't become hurt after a breakup. They do. They're just better at handling the emotions and the problems that those kind of issues present. Now, one other interesting thing is you'll notice a lot of times you'll find secure attachment styles want to be friends after a breakup. They believe that that's a healthy way to move forward. Generally speaking, they're actually proven wrong. Being friends with an ex after a breakup, in most cases, can be difficult, but that's besides the point. Secure attachment styles, counterintuitive to popular thought, is going to be the type of attachment style that tends to move on the quickest after a breakup. Let's move on to our next attachment style. If the dumper is an anxious attachment style. So people with anxious attachment styles tend to get overly attached to specific individuals and relationships. Now, you'd think that someone who becomes overly attached to individuals will jump from relationship to relationship after a breakup, but that's actually not the case. Here's the interesting thing we're finding about anxious attachment styles. So let's say that your ex is an anxious attachment style and they dump you. Your ex is actually the highest probability of coming back to you. They have the highest probability of not being able to let go. Now it's counterintuitive because again, you would think someone like this who would dump you would move on to someone else because they can't stand being alone. They almost grab their sense of self or their sense of identity in relationships themselves, but they're so stuck on the idea of you. They're so stuck on the relationship that you formed that they can't let it go. So if your ex is an anxious attachment style, they're actually not going to be able to get over the breakup very quickly. In fact, they're the highest candidate of coming back to you, which is kind of interesting. If the dumper is an avoidant attachment style. Now, avoidant attachment styles generally stem from having parents who were rarely present, leading to a child to feel as though they were destined to go through life alone. Now, dismissive avoidants, which I've done a video on very recently, have a high self-esteem but a low opinion of their partners. This kind of allows them to pretend that they don't feel anything after the breakup. So here's the main thing you need to understand about avoidant attachments. They will tend to avoid the pain that goes with a breakup, but eventually the pain will catch up to them. It's almost like a race that they can never win. They still continue to race, but they'll always be caught up to, and the emotions will kind of deal with them. When that happens, they'll do something to numb the pain. Now, every single human being is different in how they handle a breakup, but someone with an avoidant attachment style, counterintuitive, is actually more likely to numb the pain by getting into a new relationship with someone else. Like I said, they have a high sense of self, they have a high self-esteem, but they tend to look at others with not so much a high sense of self, with not so much a high thought. They look at others as almost tools to help them with their pain. And that's ultimately when we see exes jumping from rebound relationship to rebound relationship. It's counterintuitive, right? You would expect someone who has an anxious attachment style to do that, but that's actually not what we're seeing. We're seeing the avoidant attachment styles numbing their pain in these specific ways. So the ultimate question here is, someone with an avoidant attachment style who has dumped you, are they over the breakup? I would argue they're not over the breakup. While they are moving on and trying to find ways to numb the pain, the fact that they're having to numb pain, the fact that they're still thinking about you, the fact that you're the catalyst that sparked this kind of jumping from relationship to relationship tells me they are not over the breakup quite yet. And that leads us to our final type of attachment style, which is by far the rarest and most confusing for most people to understand. If your ex is a fearful attachment style. If the dumper is a fearful attachment style, what will that look like? Well, quick disclaimer, only around 7% of the entire population has this type of attachment style. Now, describing this attachment style is a little difficult, so probably the best way that I can explain it to you is it's a combination of both anxious and avoidant different types of attachment styles. So one minute you'll find that they're extremely into the relationship with you, and then the next minute you'll find that they're not into the relationship with you at all. They want to move on and want nothing to do with you, only to come back and swing the pendulum the other way months down the road and want to be with you again. Now, before you sit there and say, this sounds like my ex, this is my ex, the chances are There's a 93% chance that this is not your ex. It's also important to understand that people aren't as simple as just dividing themselves into these 4 categories. Sometimes they have combinations. For example, your ex can be an extremely avoidant type of a person with maybe a little bit of anxious tendencies. Sometimes it can be the other way. But fearful attachment styles, what does that really look like when it comes to a dumper? Do they get over breakups very quickly? So I think the important thing to realize here is that fearful, avoidant people tend to have a mixed reaction to breakups. Initially, they do attempt to not feel their feelings and instead numb them in other ways, pretending they're absolutely fine. But after some time, again, the feelings catch up to them, much like that avoidant type of a personality. But they're unable to run away. This leads them to have a lower sense of self-esteem. And of course, they have this desire to get into a new relationship as soon as possible. So if you're asking me if a fearful attachment style who has dumped you is over the breakup very quickly, I would argue that they're not. So what do we have here? We essentially have 4 different types of attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful. 3 of those 4 different attachment styles, I would argue, do not have an easy time of getting over a breakup, even if they've dumped you. They cope with a breakup in the complete wrong way, because really the correct way to handle a breakup is the secure attachment style. It's mimicking what those type of individuals are doing. But what we're finding is that most of our clients are getting exes back who are not secure, who are anxious, or most of the time avoidant. Sometimes you'll find these secure attachment styles. Like I said, they have the best chance of getting over a breakup more quickly, but even they feel pain. Breakup pain is universal. Even if you've been dumped or you're the dumper, you're still gonna feel heartache. You're still gonna feel pain. You're still gonna feel some type of emotional trauma from the experience. So it's important to keep that in mind as you go through your breakup and trying to understand a dumper. All right, so that's gonna do it for this video on explaining dumper psychology. But first things first. Again, I want you to stop everything you're doing and take the X Recovery Chances quiz that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. It's the ultimate starting point for pretty much anyone starting out in our YouTube channel or reading our articles on our website. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, all you have to do is simply look in that description link below this YouTube video to find a link to take the quiz and just basically click on it. Also, if you haven't liked, commented, or subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. Every little bit helps. I'll see you next time.